What's going on, guys? It's Illuminostic, and as I'm sure all of you have heard, Joe Biden has stepped down from the presidential race, which in my opinion isn't real anyways, but first of all, I want to apologize for going back on my word. I said that I wouldn't do any more political streams, but that was partly because I was tired of the backlash and losing patrons. We're demonetized, so if you appreciate this content, please consider becoming a patron. And also supporting the channel through other means if you like. And please do hit the like button, share, subscribe, all that stuff. Okay, so first of all, I'm not a Trump supporter. I'm not doing this because I support any political party. I'm doing this because I'm appalled and I'm trying to make a positive contribution. Some people accuse me of being divisive with this content. By the way, I've hoodied and masked up so the deep state doesn't know who I am. Clandestine. It says no data. Am I streaming or not? Just a second, guys. Trying to figure out if this is true. Okay, excellent connection. Okay, so having said all that, I'm glad to see Joe Biden go. He is one of the worst human beings in the history of the U.S. political system. His legislation, like the 1994 crime bill, destroyed millions of lives unfairly. He is a private prison puppet and all sorts of terrible things. Obvious sexual predator. I found a video yesterday or the day before that absolutely proved that. There's like no question after watching this video. So he is a despicable human being, and I'm glad that he's gone. Okay, but Kamala Harris, and I said this when he was elected, if there's any worse politician in U.S. history, it's Kamala Harris. In fact, we're going to take a look at an article written by a liberal magazine about how terrifyingly, shockingly, sadistically evil this woman is. It is an absolute disgrace to the United States that you have to choose between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, and it is an insult to the American people to put them in a position where many of them feel that they have to cast a vote for, you know, an abomination like Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. I mean, there are no words, you know, tragic, embarrassing. But so, you know, when Biden got elected, I said, you know, the worst thing that could happen is that, like, he dies and she becomes president. Because this is a woman who, not only did she say of Joe Biden a couple of weeks before she accepted the VP nomination, that the only thing we need to know about Joe Biden is whether he's more of a racist or a rapist. Just the simple fact that this is a person, a black woman, who would make that statement and then accept that nomination, she should be barred from being anywhere near any kind of position that requires integrity and substance and moral character. And that's before we even start looking at her record as a prosecutor. She, in direct violation of a Supreme Court ruling, she blocked prisoners, including ones that she knew were innocent, from being released on the grounds that they were doing labor for the state. That's keeping slavery, right? Keeping slaves. Her family, actually, incidentally, was the largest slave owners in Jamaica, right? And considering the lack of moral fabric of her family, she is so despicable that her own father doesn't speak to her to this day. He's actually spoken publicly about this. So, you know, again, I know a lot of people would and have and canceled their patronage, because they feel like anything negative that is said about their candidate is reinforcing the other side, you know, and providing support for them. But I think the reality is that any decent person with any kind of moral fabric at this point has to speak out. The United States, the people of the United States cannot continue to compromise and just say, oh, we don't have any other choice, and then actually defend these people and promote them. You know, when you're saying good things about the presidency and the character of Joe Biden, thinking that you're encouraging people to go out and vote for him, you're just giving fuel to the other side. You're reinforcing the perception that you're a deranged lunatic, you know, because it's so obviously not true. It's a horrific circumstance, and I deeply sympathize with people who have been conditioned and indoctrinated that voting is a moral responsibility. People's parents bring them up to believe that no matter what, they're morally obligated to vote for whatever party the family supports. You know, these things are so deeply, fundamentally ingrained in people that it's, you know, really difficult for them to escape the constraints that have been imposed on them by these, I guess, traditions. And it's time for that to stop. There is no acceptable response to this except for revolt. I mean, at the very least, to cast a vote for somebody like RFK Jr. or, you know, anybody else to just refuse to comply with this ridiculous scenario that's being imposed on people. While we're on the subject, something happened with a couple of things with the Trump assassination, which I absolutely believe was staged, which is not to say that people weren't killed. That doesn't matter. If you are a military intelligence strategist or any kind of person of that ilk, innocent people dying is not relevant. That has, you know, if it serves their purposes even, American citizens or not, they will not hesitate to do it, right? I mean, it's silly to believe otherwise at this point. By the way, please do hit the like button. I appreciate that a lot. So, one of the things I feel compelled to comment on about the Trump assassination, I've seen a lot of people on X saying that the fact that this woman who, I haven't fact-checked this, but people are saying that she's like an assistant director of the FBI, was sitting in the line of fire looking unconcerned is proof that it was a deep state assassination attempt. That makes absolutely no sense. First of all, if there were two shooters, Kennedy was hit in the head directly in a moving car. So the idea that like two, you know, with the technology we have now, first of all, I doubt they would be using guns if they were going to, you know, deep state is going to assassinate someone. They would do it clandestinely. But especially if there's a clandestine inside job, why would you put an FBI officer where all the cameras are pointed? And if she really thought bullets were flying directly at her, unless she knew the plan was not to hit Trump, why would she be sitting in the line of fire? I mean, this is incredibly insane that people, you know, it's confirmation bias. They're seeing what they want to see despite the, you know, insanely obvious transparency of it. And again, if it wasn't for the context of Presidential Transition Project 2025 and the intent to purge the federal government of all of the other party, all the Democrats, left-leaning people, that's part of the plan, a staged assassination attempt would justify the necessity of that. I mean, it fits the political agenda so perfectly that even if you're a hardcore Republican, that should raise your eyebrows. And you really got to pay attention if you start making an argument like, you know, oh, it's shady that this FBI woman that knew what was happening was, you know, looking unfazed. Yeah, you're right, but not for the reasons you think. She would have been in the line of fire and in front of all the cameras. It makes a lot more sense to think she was planted there because they know that people aren't going to think about it that deeply and that the confirmation bias is going to serve their purposes. And if the agenda is to increase suspicion by making nothing make sense, you know, and then also planting these things that they know people are going to interpret the wrong way because that's what it's, you know, confirmation bias. And then on top of all the other stuff, you know, this kid had to oversee offshore bank accounts. He had no social media of any kind, no email, explosives. He had no income. He had, you know, it's just ridiculously obvious, you know. And it really doesn't matter whether it is Harris or Trump in terms of the incoming totalitarian state. Both of them are completely without conscience. You know, I mean, Donald Trump has spent his entire life, 1,100 lawsuits or something. 11 times he's been sued for sexual misconduct. In one case against an 11-year-old boy. All this stuff just came out, Epstein Island, that increases the probability dramatically that he was, you know, somehow involved down there. You know, I mean, it's just, it couldn't be more obvious on both sides. So let me mess with my OBS for a second so we can have a look at Kamala Harris's. I mean, I don't think he did barely have his head blown off. I honestly think it was, you know, a blood pack or something. I mean, I saw his ear the day after. There was nothing. They have released no pictures. They've just had one letter from his doctor. I mean, if a bullet from an assault rifle had grazed his head, his eardrum probably would have been shattered. To have that little damage is completely unrealistic. Oh, and also something that he did that seriously raises suspicion. When he was talking about, he gave a speech, I guess. My partner saw it, I haven't seen it. But she tells me that he said, I'm not going to speak about it again because it hurts too much, which sounds an awful lot like they've told me not to talk about it because we're lying and I don't, you know, I'm not trying to get caught. I mean, it's just so shady, all of it. But here, let's have a look at Kamala Harris and her record and look at the options that they're actually giving you guys up there. Let's get that situated. And let me shrink this window. I mean, no one can deny the move towards totalitarianism in the United States. I mean, that would be absolutely ridiculous at this point. And also, just from a political point of view, if you consider the pressure of World War III and the benefits in terms of military power that is derived from a totalitarian state. And I mean, you know, if you guys follow me, you've heard me talk about it a million times, how there are so many threats to the overlords at this point. I think they're desperate. You know, consciousness is evolving rapidly to the point where, you know, people are in danger of awakening on a mass scale, and you really cannot govern people that have any degree of enlightenment. So let me see which, okay, I guess we're good here. Hopefully I'm out of the way enough that you guys will be able to see this article. Okay, so this is from a liberal magazine, so this is not like right-wing slander here. I guess I have to take off my disguise and expose my true identity. Okay, so let me find the really horrific stuff here. Not to mention the fact that she was asked if she smoked marijuana, and she laughed and said, "Of course I'm Jamaican." And she's put something like 2,500 people in jail, or convicted, and then, you know, hundreds in prison or something for nonviolent marijuana offenses. But California was experiencing 200% capacity in the prisons. There were not enough beds or medical personnel, extreme excess of bodies. In one prison, 54 prisoners shared a single toilet. Preventable deaths due to substandard and overstretched medical care occurred every 5 to 6 days. Suicidal inmates were locked in telephone both sides cages for 24 hours at a time. And long story short, there was legislation passed by the Supreme Court that found that California's prison system was in violation of its prisoners' Eighth Amendment rights. And despite its conservative tilt, the court identified prisoner release as the most effective method for ending the state's constitutional violation in a timely manner. And so Kamala Harris had been the state's attorney general for just over 4 months. But the Supreme Court ruling would have to be enacted on her watch. Every 6 months, the state would have to show it had decreased its prison population in compliance with a threshold overseen by a 3-judge district court panel, blah, blah, blah. It soon became clear that the state would hold out on complying with the judicial order. 2011 passed with little progress made on how the decarceration mandate, and by 2012, a report surfaced that proves the state actually intended to increase its prison population. In May of that year, Harris's office confirmed their intent not to comply with the order, but instead to seek its modification from 137% design capacity to 145%, a modification that was not permitted. The deadline for compliance was eventually extended to the end of 2013. Harris has been criticized on multiple occasions for fighting to keep people, including innocent ones, in prison, and this is where it gets really crazy. By April 2013, just 2 months from the initial deadline given in the Supreme Court decision, California still had 9,636 prisoners more than the court-imposed ceiling. The state submitted a proposal that involved relocating inmates to fire camps to fight wildfires and preventing out-of-state prisoners from being returned. But upon review, the three-panel judge found that still left California's prisons with some 4,170 prisoners over the hard limit. One thing they're not mentioning is that a lot of these prisoners were actually working for the state. They have like body repair shops and stuff in prison. And so the state is making huge amounts of money on these incarcerated people. So basically, long story short, she was ignoring the Supreme Court ruling and keeping people in prison past their release date illegally to keep them on state slave labor positions. And so there's something about how her office basically submitted a letter saying that they needed to keep these prisoners even past their release date, which is completely illegal. I mean, can you imagine? And some of them she knew were innocent. The worst one was a guy who, I think he did 27 years in total, but for 18 years, it was evidence had surfaced that exonerated him. And I have to find this. You guys won't believe this. I mean, if there's any question in your mind that this woman is actually evil, this will get rid of it. Man, I should have organized this better before I jumped on. Okay, here you go. In the case of Daniel Larson, an ex-felon sentenced to 27 years to life under California's three strikes law, Harris argued that even if Danny was innocent, his conviction should not be reversed because he waited too long to file his petition. Can you imagine? Can you imagine being this much of a scumbag to do that to someone that she knew was innocent? In fact, this went to court many times where she was the prosecutor, and the judges called her unconscionable, evil, horrible. The list of things like that she was called by multiple judges in multiple courtrooms is like a paragraph long. I mean, it's mind-blowing that this person is allowed. She should be in prison, like she really should, especially since, she knew and admitted she didn't care that this guy was innocent. She had him on death row. She wasn't just trying to keep him incarcerated. She was trying to kill an innocent man. That's the reality. That's who they're trying to make you vote for in the United States. And right now, she's talking about how she wants to reduce prison populations and, trying to undo all the damage of her history of just abhorrent evil. The California Innocence Project took Larson's case, and while her trenchant opposition to decarceration of the state's prisons aligns with those stories, her role in attempting to subvert the authority of the country's highest legal body for the sole purpose of preventing the release of a number of low-risk prisoners has gone largely unchallenged. So this isn't the only case. She did this constantly. Her role in blocking the Supreme Court's prison reduction order is deeply troubling on multiple counts. First, with the increased salience of criminal justice reform in the Black Lives Matter era, a forceful opponent of decarceration on the ticket hardly conveys that the Democratic Party is on the side of racial justice. Second, placing someone with a history of defying the Supreme Court on the Democratic ticket would significantly undermine Democratic nominee Joe Biden's pledge to return to the pre-Trump era of governance, where the three branches of government are seen as co-equal and the courts are respected. And so this is from back when Biden was running, but surprisingly and disturbingly, this was the only article I could find. People have stopped talking about this for some reason. Let's see if there's anything else really significant in here. I don't think so. So I think my point is pretty well made. That in and of itself should be enough that Democrats should be absolutely horrified that they're being asked to support this woman as president of the United States. Refusing to uphold a Supreme Court ruling should basically be some form of treason, I would imagine. I mean, these are not minor infractions. This is tremendously disturbing history. And, not only that, but this woman is probably the single most hated politician universally in my recent memory. So what is to be done, And I know that almost no one will listen to me, and people think it's futile. But the reality is that if you know this and you still make a decision to go and cast a ballot, even if the elections are totally rigged, which in my opinion they absolutely are, I have said since 2020 that Trump was being engineered to be the figurehead of a one-party totalitarian state, because the first thing you have to do to set up a totalitarian state is unify or consolidate the power under one party. And Trump will not really be the dictator. He is just a figurehead because the psychology of primates dictates that that is necessary. That's the only reason for it. The real overlords will be the same overlords. For people to believe that a billionaire like Donald Trump is actually not the deep state and against the deep state, and to see someone like Elon Musk supporting him, like the constant propaganda from Elon Musk on Twitter, and it's probably not even him. It's probably the FBI or some other propaganda engine that is just posting on his behalf with his permission. Like, it's absolutely insane and ridiculous. So, I got to keep it brief because I'm actually about to down. Travis Simpson, I agree that we should stop paying attention to the political theater to an extent, but I think that the gravity of the situation kind of demands some awareness, and I think for me, the problem is that as much as it hurts my ability to even, make money on this channel because I alienate people talking about this stuff, I have an obligation to speak about the things that I've observed, and also considering that my track record of predicting their behavior has been, frighteningly accurate. So, I have grounds to believe that I'm on the right track, and I have a moral obligation to try to spread awareness of this, and people say it's divisive, but I don't think it should be. I think it should be unifying because we should be realizing on both sides of the aisle that people are being duped on an astronomical level. And it is so obvious and transparent at this point that it is ringing absolute red alarms. These are the kind of circumstances that allow something like Nazi Germany to occur, And if you really think about it, the United States, the people of the United States have failed the world on astronomical levels by not responding to some of the even previous actions of their government. Nagasaki and Hiroshima come to mind for obvious reasons. 280,000 people killed, but only half of those when the bombs were dropped. The rest took 4 months to die of radiation sickness, moms, dogs, cats, babies, you name it. Shadows burned into the sidewalks. And that should have been enough to cause an uprising in the United States. And people accept the ridiculous excuses that, the government comes up with to explain hostility towards the United States. They hate freedom. It doesn't make any sense. Who hates freedom? They don't hate freedom. They don't hate your freedom. But think about how insane you look when you're, crying about terrorism when 5,000 people are killed, which is terrible. Never mind the fact that it's a basic certainty at this point that the U.S. government had something to do with it. And you're nuking cities and talking about, these evil dictators that are killing civilians and stuff. I mean, people outside of the U.S. notice all this stuff, and it's time that we take responsibility. If it's supposed to be a democracy, even if it's a republic, if you are put in an untenable position, an unjustifiable position, even a horrific one at this point, and you make no stand, it's unforgivable, really. You know, we have gotten to the point where people's comfort in their armchairs with their two-car garages and whatnot, you know, the degree to which that has pacified people, it can no longer be tolerated. And anyone that has any awareness of this, regardless of the consequences of social ostracization and ridicule and contempt of your fellow man, you know, none of this stuff is a sufficient excuse to justify inaction at this point. So I'm going to drop this here because there's really not any more that needs to be said about it. And I have much more productive things to do tonight, the Golden Teachers and music and whatnot. But, you know, when I heard about this today, I just, you know, I couldn't keep my mouth shut because Kamala Harris is a despicable wretch. And the United States people have to demand better than, you know, this slimy pedophile billionaire that spent his life ripping off blue-collar workers and families in order to feed his wealth. And, you know, he's being glorified as a hero. And on the other side, you have this completely corrupt private prison puppet with this unconscionable record of horrific civil rights injustices. And the decisions she was making in California were obviously on behalf of the prison system, even regardless of the mandates of the Supreme Court. You know? I mean, it's really time that people let this stuff sink in. And yeah, Project 2025. And, you know, I mean, I know it's not easy, but this is the situation we're in, and we have to act in accordance with it. Any change that is possible can be affected by the right kind and degree of force through the proper medium to the proper object. If you follow this formula, there's no chance of failure. So let's apply this wisdom and get it done. Thank you guys so much for spending this time with me. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe, consider becoming a patron, and I'll see you guys again in a couple days.